There's a specific kind of confusion that derails men's understanding of dating, relationships, and their own development. It's not about lack of information anymore. We live in an era where more knowledge about human mating behavior is accessible than at any point in history. The internet has created an unprecedented level of transparency about attraction dynamics, sexual selection, and what actually influences romantic outcomes. This transparency is both a gift and a curse. A gift because men no longer have to stumble blindly through trial and error, absorbing rejection without understanding the underlying patterns. A curse because incomplete understanding of this information leads to conclusions that are often worse than ignorance. And there are two specific misconceptions that keep showing up, 22 ways that men misinterpret the same fundamental principle, and both lead to the same self-defeating outcome. The principle we're talking about is hypergamy, the observable tendency in female mate selection to prefer partners who rank higher on certain dimensions: height, strength, resources, status, competence. This isn't controversial in evolutionary psychology. It's documented across cultures and throughout history. Women, when given choice, tend to select upward. They prefer men who are taller than them, stronger than them, who earn more than them, who have higher social status than them. This pattern has enormous explanatory power. It helps make sense of countless dating behaviors that otherwise seem arbitrary or contradictory. Why does confidence matter so much? Why do women respond differently to the same man depending on his perceived status? Why does passive nice guy behavior so consistently fail to generate attraction? Hypergamy provides a framework that answers these questions. But here's where it gets complicated. Understanding hypergamy as a concept is one thing. Understanding what it means for you, personally, in your actual life, is something else entirely. And this is where the two fatal misconceptions emerge. Misconception 1. Hypergamy is a wall you can't climb. The first misconception corresponds to the most common male reaction to learning about hypergamy, especially among younger men. They hear that women are only genuinely interested in the top 10% of men. They look at themselves, average height, average income, their average social status, and they conclude that they're locked out of the game permanently. This reaction looks like rational assessment on the surface. They think, I wasn't in the top 10% in high school. I wasn't in the top 10% in college. I'm not in the top 10% now. Therefore, I will never be in the top 10%, and even if I could get there somehow, the amount of effort required wouldn't be worth the payoff. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. So they withdraw. Not necessarily from women entirely, but from the active pursuit of becoming the kind of man women select. They might still date opportunistically, might still hope for relationships, but they've abandoned the idea of intentional self-improvement aimed at becoming genuinely desirable. They've accepted permanent mediocrity as their fate. And look, then on some level, this reaction is understandable. Dating is asymmetrical. Men initiate the vast majority of interactions, which means men absorb the vast majority of upfront rejection. Women terminate the vast majority of relationships, which means men absorb the vast majority of back-end rejection. This creates a gauntlet of potential failure that can be genuinely demoralizing, especially for men who are already starting from a position of limited success. If we were talking about investing money into a high-risk, low-reward venture, we would call the decision to walk away prudent. We would call it smart risk management. But when men make the same calculation about dating and relationships, they're called weak, lazy, entitled, or told they need to man up. The double standard is obvious, and it's worth acknowledging. But here's the fundamental error in this thinking. These men have completely misunderstood what the payoff of meeting hypergamous criteria actually is. They think the payoff is that a woman will finally choose them, that after all the work of getting fit, building wealth, developing status, the reward is female approval, sexual access, relationship security, and when framed this way, the cost-benefit analysis looks terrible. You spend 10 years building a career and a physique so that a woman will give you what she would have given someone else for free? That doesn't make sense. But that's not actually what the payoff is. The real payoff of becoming a top-tier man is not that women choose you. The real payoff is that you become a top-tier man. The benefits accrue to you directly, not secondarily through female approval. And think about what it actually means to be in the top 10%. You're stronger. That strength benefits you every single day in your energy levels, your health, your physical capability, your confidence in your own body. You're wealthier. That wealth gives you options, security, freedom, the ability to live on your own terms. You have higher status. That status means respect, influence, better opportunities, doors that open that would otherwise stay closed. These things are intrinsically valuable. They make your life better whether or not a single woman ever cares. And critically, even if you lose external trappings of success, if a divorce strips you of assets, if a career setback costs you status, you remain the source of that value. The capabilities you developed, the discipline you built. The person you became in the process of climbing to the top 10%, those don't disappear when circumstances change. A woman can only access the benefits of a high-value man indirectly, and only if that man chooses to share those benefits with her. But a high-value man benefits from his own value directly and permanently. The growth, the competence, the prosperity, it belongs to him. This is the first fatal misconception. Hypergamy doesn't primarily benefit women. It primarily benefits men who choose to meet its criteria. Women can only benefit secondarily, if at all. The man who builds himself into someone genuinely desirable isn't doing it to earn female approval. He's doing it because becoming that person makes his entire life better, and female approval is just one of many positive side effects. Now, understanding this reframes everything. The question isn't, is female approval worth the effort? The question is becoming stronger, wealthier, more capable, more confident worth the effort? And when framed that way, the answer is obvious. Misconception 2. Meeting the criteria guarantees the outcome. Now let's talk about the second misconception, which corresponds to the less common but equally problematic male reaction to learning about hypergamy. Some men hear about these selection criteria and they get energized. They think, we're perfect. Now I have a roadmap. I know exactly what women want. If I get rich, get fit, get smooth, develop status, I'll have solved the problem. I can hack the system. And in many ways, this response is more adaptive than the first. These men are taking agency. They're committing to self-improvement. They're willing to put in work. They understand that success requires meeting certain standards, and they're going after those standards with intention. The problem is that they're operating under a fundamentally flawed assumption. They think that meeting hypergamous criteria functions like a transaction. Do X, get Y. Achieve six-pack abs and a six-figure income. Receive sex and relationships in return. It's problem-solving thinking. Identify the problem, implement the solution, obtain the result. This is a classically masculine cognitive pattern being projected onto female sexuality, and it doesn't work. Here's the reality that these men eventually discover, usually after years of effort. Women don't give sex and relationships to men simply because those men meet selection criteria. Yes, all else being equal. And a woman is more likely to choose a fit, wealthy, high-status man over a man who lacks these qualities. But it is absolutely not true that having these qualities guarantees female interest, or even makes it easy to obtain. Meeting hypergamous criteria is better understood as a necessary but insufficient condition for sexual opportunity. It gets your foot in the door. It makes you a viable candidate. But it doesn't close the deal, and it doesn't make the process effortless. You could be a handsome, successful brain surgeon with impeccable social proof, and you can still sit alone at a bar all night without a single woman approaching you. You still have to initiate. You still have to navigate the early interaction correctly. You still have to create attraction, build comfort, escalate appropriately, handle resistance, manage logistics. And here's the part that frustrates men the most. You have to start from zero with every new woman. Imagine working in your career for 20 years, building expertise and credentials and a track record of success. Now imagine showing up to a job interview where the default assumption is that you're a fraud and a criminal until you prove otherwise. That's what dating feels like for men, even high-value men. Every new interaction begins with skepticism and caution. She has to feel safe. She has to feel heard. She has to feel like you're interested in more than her body. She has to feel chemistry. She has to feel like you're emotionally available, but not needy, confident, but not arrogant, interested, but not desperate. And if you say one wrong thing, make one misstep, fail one of her countless tests, the opportunity evaporates instantly. Now it's true that the higher your value, the more margin for error you have. A very attractive, high-status man can get away with things that would disqualify a lower-value man. But he still has to play the game. He still has to seduce. He doesn't get to bypass the process just because he has muscles and money. In fact, a man who spends 10 years building his physique and his income, but never learns how to actually create attraction and escalate sexually, will often have less success than a man who spent 1 year learning seduction and has neither the physique nor the income. Think about what this means. The markers of high status, the wealth, the physique, the accomplishments, these are what we might call attraction proxies. They signal that you're probably high value, but signals aren't the same as reality. Or women are evaluating the reality through direct interaction. This is why you can have all the credentials in the world and still get rejected for reasons that seem trivial or arbitrary. Does he remember the day we met? Did he open the door for me? How do I feel when I'm with him? Does he make me laugh? Does he look at other women? Would our kids' hands look weird? Behind the general hypergamous criteria that apply to all women, there's an almost infinite list of personal criteria that apply to each individual woman, and failure to meet any one of these criteria can eliminate the opportunity, regardless of how many other boxes you check. This is the second fatal misconception. Meeting hypergamous criteria does not guarantee sexual opportunity, and it doesn't even make sexual opportunity easy. Being in the top 10% might change the equation if you're in the top 0.001%, think globally famous celebrities. But for normal high achievers, you still have to do the work of attraction every single time. The irony of both misconceptions. What's fascinating is that both of these misconceptions, despite being opposite reactions to the same information, tend to produce the same outcome: men walking away from women. The first group walks away because they think the game is rigged and they can't win. The second group walks away after years of effort when they discover that winning the game doesn't look like they thought it would. Both groups end up disillusioned, frustrated, and increasingly opting out. And this is exactly what we're seeing in broader culture: rising rates of male sexlessness, declining marriage rates, men choosing video games and pornography over the pursuit of real relationships. Some of this is rational response to genuine risks: divorce law, false accusations, the erosion of traditional relationship structures. But some of it is based on these fundamental misconceptions about how attraction actually works. The accurate framework. So what's the accurate understanding that avoids both misconceptions? First, recognize that becoming a high-value man is worth doing for its own sake, regardless of female response. The strength, wealth, competence, status, these things make your life better in countless ways. Women noticing you is a side benefit, not the primary purpose. Second, recognize that attracting women is a skill separate from being high value. Status and success make the skill easier to deploy effectively. But they don't replace the need for the skill. You still have to learn how to create attraction, how to escalate, how to seduce. And this is learnable. It's not mysterious or impossible, but it requires deliberate practice and honest feedback, just like any other skill. Third, Understand that even with both high value and high skill, dating will never be effortless for most men. There will always be rejection. There will always be women who aren't interested despite you doing everything right. There will always be the need to initiate, to take risks, to start from zero with each new person. This is the structure of the game, not a sign that you're failing. The men who succeed long-term are the ones who build themselves for their own sake, develop the skills required for attraction, and accept the inherent asymmetry and uncertainty of the process without becoming bitter about it. The men who fail are the ones who either never start building themselves because they assume it's hopeless, or who build themselves while expecting that the building itself will make women fall into their lap. Both groups are operating from flawed mental models, and both groups end up in the same place, alone, frustrated, and convinced that the problem is external rather than internal. The game is neither impossible nor automatic. It's a game that rewards genuine development combined with genuine skill and punishes both complacency and entitlement. Understanding this won't make dating easy, but it will make it make sense. And making sense of it is the first step toward actually succeeding at it.